the PreSonus Studio 1824C audio interface. In this video, we'll check it out, see how to download the included software, and get it up and running. First, this is what's included in the box. Of course, the audio interface. The PreSonus Studio 1824C is an 18 in, 18 out, or 20 out, depending on how you like to count the outputs, a USB-C audio interface. 24-bit and up to 192K for your sample rate. While this interface is USB-C, it still uses the USB 2 protocol, just like most other USB-C interfaces out today. There's no problem with this since USB 3 doesn't actually offer much, if anything, in terms of lower latency. USB 3 would offer higher bandwidth, but you're not going to max that out with this interface anyway. Thunderbolt, on the other hand, would actually offer improvements in latency because of the way it communicates with the computer, but that's another topic. So there's nothing wrong or bad with USB 2 interfaces. Hit music is made with them every single day. There are two USB cables included, a USB-C to USB-C cable, and a USB-C to USB-A or standard cable. Then the power supply, which is a normal sized plug because it connects to the power brick here. And you get 4 rubber feet that you could affix to the bottom of the unit if you want to set this on a desk. You could of course mount this in a rack as well. This is what's known as a 1U rack mountable interface. And lastly, your getting started guide and safety information. There's also some included software like Studio One Artist, which is a feature-reduced DAW, Universal Control, and the Studio Magic plugin bundle that you will have access to once you register the interface, which we'll do later in this video. Now we'll look at the features of the 1824C. Starting on the front, we have 2 combo mic instrument line inputs. You can connect XLR cables for microphones or 1/4-inch cables for instruments or line devices to these inputs. Use this button to switch between line or instrument. You would use this setting for an electric guitar or bass that has passive pickups, and use the line setting for guitar or bass with active pickups like EMGs or blackouts, or of course things like mixers, keyboards, etc. The preamps are PreSonus XMAX Pre-Amps with a Class A input buffer and dual servo gain stage, so they offer high gain and very low noise. The gain range is 80 dB, which is very high for an interface in this price range. Use these knobs to adjust the gain from -15 to +65 dB. And yes, you heard me correctly, we have 65 dB of gain for these preamps. So you'll be able to drive pretty much any microphone, even low output dynamic microphones like the Shure SM7B, which requires a minimum of 60 dB of gain. You may still want to have another preamp on hand like the Cloud Lifter, just to give yourself more headroom, but you wouldn't technically need it. We have 6 more combo inputs on the back as well. These are mic line only. There's no instrument preamp for these. Use this button to turn phantom power on or off. You would of course use phantom power for condenser microphones. When you turn phantom power on, it's on for all of the mic inputs. While it would be nice if you could turn phantom power on per channel, it usually won't be an issue if you're connecting condenser microphones that use phantom power and dynamic microphones that do not use phantom power at the same time. Most dynamic microphones will simply ignore the phantom power. A few vintage dynamic ribbon microphones could possibly be damaged, but in general, it's just not an issue. Always look at the guide for your microphone to see if it will be damaged by phantom power. Then we have our input meter display. Of course, keep your inputs in the green and yellow range to avoid clipping, which would be red. Then our output meters. Press the mute button to mute the mains. Press the mono button to collapse the signal from stereo to mono. This is useful to check for phase problems with your mix. There's the sync light, so we know the interface is in sync with the computer. The main volume knob. Then we have 2 independent headphone outputs. Headphone 1 shares a playback stream with outputs 1 and 2, and headphone output 2 shares a playback stream with outputs 3 and 4. And the power button. This will illuminate different colors depending on what the clock is doing. On the rear of the unit, we have the 6 combo mic line inputs that we saw earlier, then 8 balanced 1/4-inch outputs. These are also DC coupled, so you can send control voltage to external gear if you want to do that. The main outputs, this is where you would plug in your main studio monitors. And something that's pretty cool in my opinion is that outputs 1 and 2 share the output stream with the main outs. So that means you could connect additional monitors or a headphone amp or other device to outputs 1 and 2, and it would be the same string that's going out to your mains. It makes it easy to connect other devices where you want the same audio that's going out to your monitors. We have SPDIF input and output, and ADAT input and output as well. Here's the BNC output for word clock, our MIDI in and MIDI out ports, the USB-C port. This device is compatible with USB 2 and USB 3 ports on your computer, and the power connection. You'll also get the UC Surface Control software to set up different low latency monitor mixes. So let's go ahead and register our product and get to our downloads. So head to my.presonus.com and create an account if you don't have one. I already have one, so I am logged in. We'll come here to register a product. We'll choose hardware and we'll estimate our purchase date. Good enough. And enter the serial number. You can find the serial number on your getting started guide or on the bottom of the unit. So we'll go ahead and type that in. Check that box and register it to our account. And there we go. View our product. And there we go. There's our serial number now in our account. Of course, that's blurred out for you. Here's our Studio Magic bundle. Let's go ahead and redeem that. We'll just choose redeem now. And we can scroll down here and look at all of the different stuff. There's a lot of different serial numbers in here that I'm, of course, having to blur out. I'm not going to download all of this stuff because it's pretty straightforward. But here is your Studio One artist. Currently, we get output movement, some stuff from Klinghelm, Plugin Alliance, and plenty more there. So just come in here and start downloading all of these things and take note of your serial numbers in order to register them. I'll just click download Studio One for artist. I'm sure most people will want that. I can download this if I want to. There's our product key. Download the installer there. In this case, I would have to create an output account or log into my existing account to make sure that's registered to the proper account for me. But let's go back. We'll come here to add-ons. And that's where you can get back to your included content. And of course, you can get, if you didn't download it already, you can head to software and download your PreSonus Studio One artist. So that's how you register your interface and get access to all of your downloaded products. So let me come back here to hardware and view details. And let's download our installer here for Windows. This is for universal control, okay? Go ahead and download that because this is going to contain our driver, which we're going to need for Windows. If you're on Mac, this is core audio compliant, but for Windows, we need the ASIO driver. So be sure to install universal control because it contains all of that in one installation, including the UC Surface interface, so we can do all of our routing from the software. And if you're on Mac, be sure to come here to view other systems and download the Mac installer. You'll still want universal control. You don't really need the driver since it's core audio compliant, but you'll still want that, that UC Surface to do all of your routing. And let's go ahead and install universal control, which again is going to be our driver here as well. And we'll just go through this real quick. You can head through here and untick things that you don't need if you want, or just install everything. It's not going to hurt anything to install, drivers for the interfaces that you don't have. I'll just install everything, but if you just want to do the 1824C, of course, just choose the Studio series. And we're done with that. Click finish. Okay. Again, you can go ahead and install Studio One 4 if you want. We might do that later on, but for this video, we're just going to use Pro Tools to test out this interface. Now that universal control and our driver is installed, we'll connect the interface to our computer. So I'll plug in the power adapter and the USB cable. I'll go ahead and connect my studio monitors. The monitors are powered off, by the way. Always turn your monitors off before turning on or turning off your audio interface to prevent loud pops and from damaging your monitors. So let's go ahead and power it on. And there we go. The computer has recognized the device and we're ready to use it. So now that we have our driver installed and the 1824C connected to our computer, we'll take a real quick look at universal control. Go ahead and open it up here. And as you can see, there's our serial number. Of course, it's being blurred out. Our current sample rate, we can switch that right here. Our clock source. So if we have SPDIF or ADAT, we can switch that. Our block size, which is essentially your buffer size. Okay, we can switch that in here. loop back, which is a feature we have here on Windows. So we can take audio from one application and record it into another application doing this. We'll look into that in future videos, okay? So come up here to settings. You can set this to always on top. You have options in here, a bunch of different stuff that you can do. Again, just a real quick look at it here. Go to File. You can sign into your PreSonus account here. And to open up the control surface, just click your interface. And there it is. So there's a microphone connected to the 1824C right now. So you see that input there. Basic things you can do is you can mute that input. Of course, you can set up different mixes, mix 3 and 4, mix 5 and 6, mix 7 and 8. We can turn on or off 48 volt phantom power from within here. So if I click that, you're going to see that that microphone is actually going to go down because 48 volt is being turned off. It's slowly scaling down. So there you can see our microphone that is connected, which is a condenser microphone, which obviously needs 48 volt phantom power. So I can turn it on from within our control surface, or of course, right on the interface itself. We can switch our inputs here to line or the instrument preamp, up to you there. Mute the mains, send them to mono. And of course, all of this affects the actual unit. You'll see the lights come on and off whenever you change stuff in here. You cannot use the fat channel plugins within this interface, by the way. The Studio 192 does have DSP on board to host, some plugins on board. This here for the 1824C, this is just for mixing and routing and things like that, okay? So keep that in mind. Color our channels here, just select the channel you want. Give it a color, basic stuff here. Main mix here for our SPDIF. Come to the gear icon real quick. We can bypass the mixer, so we can just bypass that direct input if you just want to monitor through your DAW. So you can do that right within here, just bypass it. We can show the ADAT or not. Let me go back here. So we can show the ADAT in here. This is resizable, by the way, this window. Sometimes you get these things, they're just not resizable, but you can resize this pretty much however you want. See our ADAT channels there. We don't need those because I have nothing hooked up to it. Peak hold, again, mixer bypass right there. Driver settings, dark scheme or a light scheme there. Colorized channels is on right now. If I turn it off, we just have the tab there at the bottom. Okay, turn that back on. And now the entire channel will be colored. All right. So just a quick look at that. Of course, we have our panning right here. And as mentioned, mute and solo, you can make these, say, a stereo channel or mono channel, separate mono channels right there. So a lot of stuff you can do in here. I'm not going to go through all of it here, but that's just a quick look at our UC surface control and the universal control here to change our sample rate, basically your driver control panel right here. And these are two separate applications, by the way, as you can see down here. In Windows, they're both separate. I can close one, the other can be open. Okay. Pop this back open here. I can close the other one. And of course, this will stay open. All right. So that's a quick look at universal control. When you first connect the 1824C to your computer, it might switch you over automatically to using that interface, the 1824C, as your main interface for Windows, meaning sounds from, say, a browser like YouTube or something you're playing through Windows Media Player, for example. Okay, so that might switch you over automatically. Now, there's not usually anything wrong with using your interface, at least these days, for Windows sounds and your DAW sounds. But in case you have problems, you can always switch that around right here just by clicking, left-clicking on the speaker icon and come in here, and I could switch this right back to my computer speakers, for example. Okay. Also, if that doesn't happen, or if you want to switch things around, come in here and right click on your speaker icon, choose sounds, come over here to the playback tab, scroll down here, and you can see here's our ADAT that we can set up. Here's the line out 1-2, which is the default communication device. You can always right click here. You can disable that if you want. You can set it as the default device again if you want. Same for 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8 there as well. Or of course, we can always go back to our computer speakers, which are right here. Just set that as default. Same thing for recording. Come over here to recording tab, So things like Skype or any sort of program that you're running on Windows, that's not your DAW, because our DAW is going to use the ASIO drivers. This is something completely separate from that. Okay, so if you have a webcam program, Skype or something like that, you can set up the recording, the inputs in here. Okay, so mic line 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, so on and so forth. All right. And one thing you might want to do if you're going to use this as your main interface for Windows, all right, let's find, let's say out 1 and 2, set it as the default, come down here to properties, come here to advanced and switch this over to 24-bit 48K. All right. You can also decide if you want to allow exclusive mode or not. That's up to you. Try out different things. If one program keeps, taking over, holding the driver and not allowing it to be used in another program, you might want to come in here and take those off. Okay. Just apply that, which I already have it switched over. Same thing for the recording tab. Come over here, find whatever input you want, right click it, properties, or just come to properties down here. Same stuff, advanced. Make sure you switch this to 48K. Okay. Same thing for the exclusive mode. You might want to uncheck that if you're having issues. All right. So just be aware of that. And if you are having issues with your DAW running simultaneously with, say, YouTube sounds coming through your PreSonus 1824C, if you're having problems with your DAW, whether it's Studio One, Pro Tools, whatever it is, you might want to try disabling these inputs and outputs. To do that, just right click and choose disable, right click and choose disable, so on and so forth for all of those. Same thing over here on the playback, right click, disable, right click, disable. Okay. So if you're getting clicks and pops or clocking errors, or maybe Pro Tools makes no sound or YouTube makes no sound or something because the driver's being held, try coming in here and just disabling it from Windows and just use standard computer speakers for your computer sounds. Okay. Now, again, today, this is not really that big of a deal since multi-client drivers are so much better than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you couldn't really use the same interface for two different sound sources. One would always sort of lock the other one out, but drivers are much better today, so you probably won't have any issue. But just in case you do, remember you can always come in here and disable that stuff just by right-clicking and choosing disable. All right, so if you want to use this as the interface for Windows, that is how you can set that up real quick. And of course, always switch back to standard computer speakers as well. So now we'll look at how to set up the 1824C with your DAW. In this case, I'm just going to use Pro Tools. Okay, so we've already launched it, have a session launched here, and this might be different for you, but I have multiple audio interfaces, so I need to make sure I'm actually using the 1824C. So come up here to setup and playback engine. This of course is different than other DAWs, but it's sort of similar. So playback engine right now is the Complete Audio 6 because that's the last interface I used. Just use this drop down. We'll switch over to this Studio USB ASIO driver. And of course for Pro Tools, that's going to close. Don't switch anything right now. Just choose OK. If you get an error report, don't worry about it. Just because our IO has changed so much. Okay, so now come up here to setup again, playback engine, and make sure we're using the 1824C, which we are. All right, so we can switch this higher if we have a lot of plugins going on, we're mixing, and of course lower if we're recording. So preferably 128 or lower if you're playing guitar or singing or whatever the case may be. All right, but we can switch that right here. So let's open up our universal control. Let me move this over. Choose OK there. And you can see that switches over right here as well. I could also come in here and say 512. Then we'll come over here to setup and playback engine. And you can see it's on 512. Okay, so we can switch it from either place here. One thing real quick that we can do, come here to settings and go to always on top for universal control. So that way when I'm clicking here inside of Pro Tools, this doesn't get sent behind. Same thing for our control surface here as well. So I click here in Pro Tools, right? I'm clicking tracks and things. It's going to stay up in front. I can just move it out of the way, move things around, and this will always stay, on top. So the next thing we need to do is set up our inputs and outputs. As you can see, this is grayed out right now because it's not set to an active input. That's our plugins. Let me come back over here, interface. Might need to default this out, as you can see. Okay. So come up here to Setup, I/O, and let's go to the Input tab first, and just hit Default. Okay. Output, just hit Default. Go to the buses, go ahead and default that out too while you're at it. And we don't need to default these. Those should be fine. And okay. Now everything should show up properly here. So this is a mono channel showing all of our mono inputs. And there we go. If I monitor that, you can see the input because we have that microphone connected. Okay. Stereo track, of course, choose your stereo inputs. And of course, for the outputs now, we have everything correctly laid out. So now you're ready to go ahead and start recording, in this case in Pro Tools, but again, it's similar for any DAW, but you're ready to go ahead and start recording with the 1824C. Okay, so for those who are brand new and have absolutely no idea how to record, we'll quickly record a microphone. So I'll use a condenser microphone in this case, connected to our 1824C. Make sure I turn on phantom power. Then here in Pro Tools, again, in this case, make sure I select the proper input, which is going to be that one there. I'll monitor that input so I can see I'm getting a good level. Of course, adjust my gain on the interface. All right. Now, again, keep in mind your buffer. If you're going to be monitoring through Pro Tools, you'll definitely want this to be 128 or lower. Sometimes you can get by with 256. Okay. But of course, with the 1824C, we can direct monitor, and you can control that with universal control. So let me open it up again, pop this open. As you can see, there's our input right there. So one thing you might want to do, if you want to monitor through the 1824C direct, okay, you might want to mute. Let's go and put that there again. You might want to mute the input in Pro Tools. Okay. So that way you're not going to get the feedback here through your monitor mix. Okay. If I have this unmuted right there, then you can see our DAW return right here on 19, as you can see. Will be coming through right there. Again, if I mute it here in Pro Tools in this case, then it's not coming in. Okay. Of course, the other option, because we have so many routing possibilities with this software interface and with the hardware, of course, and with our DAW, another thing we could do is just monitor through Pro Tools if you wanted to do that. And of course, I could just mute that input here if I want. Of course, we're still going to get it through right there, but we could come over here to our gear icon and just bypass the mixer. Okay. So there you go. So then you could just go ahead and monitor everything right through Pro Tools, which is something you might want to do if you're monitoring through plugins and things like that in your DAW. Okay. But in our case, we would probably want to actually monitor through direct here. So what I would do is mute the input, record enable the track here in Pro Tools, and then of course, just record your microphone take. As you can see, it's recording right there. Whenever you're done, obviously just stop. And of course, you can have other things going on while you're recording your mic or playing back your mic as you want. But that's a real quick look at how to record a microphone with the 1824C. The basic things are make sure you get your input correct. I'm plugged into input 1, so obviously I'm going to choose input 1. I'm going to arm the track. I'm going to record the track, and if I want to monitor the track direct, then I just make sure I have that right up here in our universal control, and then mute the input as you're recording, and that's all there is to it. And you'll have a no latency mix in your headphones while you're recording, and whenever you're done, of course, you can hear that what was recorded in your DAW. And now we'll go ahead and record a guitar, just for those who aren't familiar with doing this. So go ahead and grab your guitar, plug in your 1/4-inch cable. I'm going to plug right into the front, and because this guitar has active pickups, I'm going to go ahead and punch the line button there. So I have line level. Now, if you have passive pickups, make sure this light is not on because you want instrument level. Okay, instrument level is higher than line level because active pickups are usually so hot. I don't need that instrument preamp. All right. So again, my case, I have the line button pushed, but you can always mess around with that. There's actually nothing necessarily wrong with using active pickups with an instrument input. Just your gain's going to be way lower, and you know, it really depends on the preamp. You might get some crackling and some weird noises. So again, the technically correct way if you have active pickups, is go ahead and press that line button. Or you could even, plug into the back. Then here in Pro Tools, again, in this case, let's go ahead and set up our input, which I already have it here correct. Okay. I'm plugged into the second input, and because I like to do everything in the box, I'm going to want a guitar amp, right? So grab our guitar amp plugin, right? Load my preset, all set up and ready to go. Now, because I want to monitor through Pro Tools, again, make sure we have a very low buffer here. We can't really use direct monitor in this case. So it's on 64. That's fine. I could take it down further if I wanted, but 64 is fine. You can't really use the direct monitor in this case through the 1824C. We turn the guitar up. You can see the input there, of course, because this signal right here is going to be the dry guitar sound. So I can't monitor through this. It's just going to sound like dry guitar. I need to hear it. I need to hear it amped, right? So of course, go ahead and input monitor your track here in Pro Tools. Again, in this case, it's similar for other DAWs. Go ahead and adjust the input gain on the interface. Make sure that you're not clipping, okay? So just take it up to whatever looks good to you. So that level's pretty good for me. Now we have some options here, okay? We can come in here, and again, we're on channel 2 for the input. We can mute the input there and just monitor the output of the DAW here through our universal control, okay? Because that's going to be the output of the DAW, in this case, again, Pro Tools. All right, that's one option. We can't do what we did previously with the microphone whenever we muted the input here, because again, this is the dry guitar, not the amped guitar. So we need to hear the amped guitar. So that's option number 1, is of course, again, to mute the input in here. The other option, if you don't need to monitor through universal control at all, hit your gear icon, mixer bypass, and that's it. Then you can go ahead and monitor right through Pro Tools, and of course to record, arm that track, and go ahead and lay down your guitar track. That is the PreSonus Studio 1824C audio interface, a very useful interface with lots of I/O and flexible routing. The UC Surface software makes it easy to route mixes. We'll go more into that in other videos. PreSonus also offers other apps, by the way, that you could use on your phone or tablet. The included software bundle is actually pretty good, especially if you don't already have a DAW or lots of plugins. And the preamps on this interface are very powerful and very quiet. So if you want to add a PreSonus Studio 1824C to your studio, check the description for links. This is the PreSonus Studio 1824C audio interface.